Last night I could feel something breaking apart, like old ice in the spring revealing something. Something I thought I already believed, words I would have said years ago, but the emotional and somatic awareness that I'm feeling this morning is so fresh it's almost too hot to touch. I can't find words to speak directly to it, they feel too small, so I'm going to try and show it to you by talking around and about it, weaving into some steps for whatever my 2 cents is worth here. It feels like we're going over a curved cliff, and we just passed the point where there's no possibility of climbing back up. So I'm feeling a sense of vertigo this morning, like the way your stomach rises when you fall unexpectedly, and like now we're completely, fully falling. Whew. It's tempting to think, this is the real beginning of the end of the U.S. empire. There's no coming back from this one way or another, however it shakes out. And there's a way in which that's true, but it's not the whole truth. In reality, I don't think Trump is terribly different than Christopher Columbus. Like Trump, Columbus sex-trafficked children, locked people in cages, stole tons of wealth, advocated totalitarian forms of ethnic cleansing. Columbus is the real father of the U.S. It's his explicit blueprints of genocide and enslavement that this country was built on. The two men seem cut of similar cloth, even if Columbus seems to have had a little less bluster and fantasy to him. Point is, if the second Trump presidency marks the beginning of the end of the U.S. empire, it also reveals the beginning and the entire span. This is what the U.S. has always been. We just outsourced it globally for a while in the middle, and now it's coming home. Colonization of the U.S. began with brutal racist totalitarianism, and then there was a period of kind of limited pseudo-success for some white residents of the U.S. into a kind of painfully boring escalation of corporate feudalism, and now we're coming full circle back to the brutal totalitarianism. So the thing that was breaking apart last night for me wasn't the U.S. empire. That's what it's always been in various clothing. Despite my decades of action and reading, it was my residual image of this country, which was built on my privilege and shaped by my colonial education. Again, words I would have said last week and thought I understood, but the emotional awareness feels like a hot meteor that just landed in front of me. Let me give you an example. Around 2 a.m. last night, as I was compulsively refreshing the AP map, I had this thought. The entire U.S. legal system is now completely untrustworthy. Like we can't trust a single court or law now. I would have said those exact words years or even a week ago, but as the emotional awareness of that truth hit me last night, immediately, the privilege of that revelation hit me like a sledgehammer. That fact has been true for black people in this country forever. The first police forces in this country were started to catch enslaved people who had escaped. That's the foundation of the entire U.S. legal system. Judges today are regularly caught literally selling black children into the slave camps we politely refer to as prisons. And as with almost all crime, most of the judges who do that are never caught. So beyond my intellectual belief that courts are untrustworthy, the somatic, emotional experience of, oh my God, the courts are now completely untrustworthy, was a breaking of my privileged worldview. Lessons are often cyclical, so this is not binary. I don't just know this now. I will learn other layers of that truth as I watch the legal system weaponized against all people who work for a better world in the coming years. If I'm put through the legal system for trying to create a better world, I'll learn deeper layers of this still. And make no mistake, the odds of that are becoming ever higher. Every fascist regime makes critique illegal. That's in the handbook. So there's a very real possibility that videos like this will be criminalized. Honestly, if they don't, it would be a break from fascist tradition. Though, in this brave new world of AI, it's very hard to say what that criminalization or punishment will look like. If I were their strategists, I would keep doing exactly what they're doing, which is putting people like Dustin Carmack, who wrote Project 2025's intelligence plan, in as the policy director at Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram. So modern criminalization may just be escalating layers of shadow banning and intentional emotional isolation through the algorithm. The more they can conceal their club, the less resistance they'll face, and some of them know that. But whether the laws are overt or covert, count on the line of what kinds of resistance are tolerated, including speech, moving very rapidly once Trump is in office. And this, too, is a revelation born of privilege. For years, the exact same behavior that would get a white middle-class kid in a suburban school a stern speaking to from the principal has gotten black inner-city kids put in handcuffs by police and shuttled onto the school-to-prison pipeline. So it's a time of revelations, especially for those of us with more privilege. There is an emergent, embodied, somatic awareness of what this country has always been that is landing for a lot of people today. While people with my level of privilege are getting hit with that pretty hard, none of this is binary, and I'd be shocked if every human alive wasn't going through some similar process of gaining deeper layers of somatic awareness of what this system is. This means that the coming years are the most fertile context for organizing that we've seen in centuries. Organizing using a diversity of tactics. On one hand, there's what my wife calls countergrowth. It's the intentional creation of beautiful new systems which meet people's needs in a way that draws energy and power away from the systems of corporate fascism. Another, which some of us call composting, is the strategic resistance to fascism in a way that exposes and disempowers it, helping to break down the self-consuming system of corporate fascism so that its decomposing body can more quickly become healthy fertilizer for a better world. These approaches are neither binary nor in competition. Many healthy forms of resistance have elements of both. Picture Robin Hood. He was both siphoning energy away from the harmful system and helping to create avenues of mutual aid and community support. Part of this organizing will be navigating the strong emotions and tensions that the work we're stepping into will generate. Some of those tensions are predictable, and we can get ahead of them by acting now to understand them and create systems of community support to mediate them. For example, we're about to see a lot of conversations that look like this. All right, this is serious. We really need to get to work, guys. It's been serious. We've been working. Where the hell have you been? Both of these statements are completely true, and both are totally valid, and we need to figure out how to hold both in a way that generates solidarity. Imagine being someone on a train headed for a cliff, and most of the passengers are completely ignoring that fact. You've been screaming for as long as you can remember that we need to stop this train, we need to get off, we need to do something, and less than 1% of the passengers have even turned to look at you. Then, all of a sudden, a passenger runs up to you and says, "Hey, this train's about to go off a cliff, we need to get to work." Can you imagine the emotional experience of that? How you might rightfully be like, oh my God! That's a very valid emotion that we need to hold well. Now imagine showing up to a circle of people who you think might be doing good work, who you might want to get more involved with. Immediately, there's some people in that circle who start screaming at you as soon as you get there, yelling, "Why weren't you here already? Where have you been?" On a purely emotional level, in that new group of people, can you imagine feeling judged, excluded, and annoyed? Like, I'm here now, I'm doing the thing you want, and you're mad at me? Fuck you, this community seems like it sucks. That's a totally valid emotional response, and we need to hold that as well. A central piece of this is understanding that all communities and organizing spaces have different circles. They're interwoven circles. People, especially organizers and people who've been at the same work for a while, need to vent in order to show up to the work over time. That's healthy. We need to create spaces for people to vent, often one-on-one, often in small groups with shared analysis. Teachers' lounges are this space. That's where teachers can just go off about the ridiculous, super frustrating kids, validate one another, take a breath, and then go back out. In community, neither the big circle nor the welcoming circle are the place for venting, almost ever. I know one large radical community in Korea that has an annual Organizers Complaining Day, where the whole community, hundreds of people, get together once a year and the organizers get to take turns going up on stage and just going off about how hard and crappy organizing is, the barriers they face, what they have to deal with. And the community just holds space for that. That's an example of the exception. That's the big circle making space for venting in a really beautiful way. But outside of those kinds of rare, specific contexts, venting in the big circle causes a lot of harm and corrodes the community, especially for new members. Is it frustrating that it took this long for a lot of people to realize that we need to do a lot more, risk a lot more? Absolutely. Is it ridiculous that men, white people, all the privileged demographics have catastrophically failed to show up to this work in meaningful ways until now, and will realistically continue to fail to show up in the ways that we wish they would? We would. Yeah. As an educator, I feel this frustration often when I see people trying to educate in ways that cause harm. Most of the popular education videos I see on the internet, I'm like, great, I'm glad you're trying to educate about this. Can you please study some more pedagogy so that you're not actively hurting people as you try and help people? But directing that frustration at new people who are now trying to show up and raise awareness, who are putting a toe into the water of more meaningful engagement, that's actively harmful. I'm not saying it's not justified, especially for more marginalized people. It's absolutely justified. We're just all still responsible for the impacts of our behavior in community, even when our emotions are completely justified. There's two invitations here. The first is for all the beautiful people, myself absolutely included, who are now getting more involved in community work, organizing, resistance. As we engage, we are guaranteed to encounter people who are annoyed with us. I'm asking us to remember that train headed for a cliff metaphor. Those emotions are completely valid, and we have the opportunity to support people who've been doing this work longer than us by holding their valid emotions. Remember that those emotions are about the system. It's not actually personal. And we can just say, yeah, I'm fucking mad at myself for how long it took me to get here as well. I'm sorry. How can I help now? Please point me to a broom or a hammer. I'm ready to get to work. Those are easy words, cost you nothing. We don't need to be defensive or carry any ego in that. We can just support the communities we're stepping into by acknowledging the validity of those emotions and our role in them. That's solidarity. The second invitation is for people who've been doing this work for some time and are now seeing an influx of people and energy, as many of us have. As I have around education and masculinity for a long time. I'm asking us all to find avenues to vent our frustration, which don't punish people for trying to do better. I'm asking us all to make a good faith effort to direct our frustrations into contexts which don't cause unnecessary collateral damage or drive people away. Find the teacher's lounge. Find the people who can process and vent with you. Communities are made of interwoven circles. Like if a new guy shows up to a feminist men's group I'm running and I take out my frustration at all the men who don't go to any men's groups on him, what have I done? If that makes sense, then I'm inviting us all to do the very hard work of carrying that ethic onto the internet. To be honest, while the thoughts of where have you been, why haven't you been able to see what's right in front of us absolutely come up for me today, it's been a long time since I'd say that out loud because of how actively harmful it is. Not to put too fine a point on it, but I suspect that if anything is left of this civilization in 50 years to run a Freedom of Information Act request on, we'll learn that these are the exact tactics that the fascist plants in radical communities are using today. Shame and judge people for being late to the game or for the most minor of infractions, and then if anyone tries to address that, call them out for tone policing. Cut apart the potential for solidarity before it even begins. Feed fractures. Bring all the meaningful work grinding to a complete halt using the language of nuance and liberation. Just pour gravel into all the gears of healthy community process and solidarity, painting it to look like support. The critiques of tone policing are valid, but when it becomes a weapon against creating welcoming communities and practicing solidarity, it's no longer helping us. That line is super tricky and nuanced because that argument is guaranteed to be weaponized against marginalized people, and we have to be prepared to identify and address that as well. I'm not claiming to have the answers to these super nuanced challenges in organizing. I'm just illuminating them so that we can all look at them together, because unless we can learn to navigate these waters far better than we have been in a real hurry, we're going to waste or miss the massive opportunity that Trump's re-election is giving us. Yes, it is horrifying that we just elected a fascist again. It's accelerating a bunch of wild harms. Yes, I feel a sense of vertigo in my stomach as my privileged consciousness breaks open more and we fall into this unknown future together. And the silver lining is huge in terms of the potential for meaningful change. This is a powerful time to be alive, and every one of us needs to manifest a level of organizing capacity, maturity, support, and solidarity that are the exact opposite of how this culture teaches us to be. It's a big ask, but we just don't have time for a long learning curve on this. White men should absolutely not be our ideological leaders in this work. And anyone with a platform has a responsibility today. Silence is complicity. Count on me making mistakes in trying to balance those things, and count on me continuing to learn and try. I'm starting a podcast. I just booked my first guest. She is a powerhouse Indigenous matriarch, and she's the top of my list of people to listen to for guidance in these times, for strategy, for movement forward. I'm very excited. Also, I strongly recommend everyone read Adrienne Maree Brown's masterwork, Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds. It's a playbook for the work that we need to do today, and all of us need to get up to speed in a hurry. If you're feeling like you don't know what to do, how to engage, where to turn, Adrienne is handing it to you. It's right here. The weave of personal, social, and cultural in this is amazing. It is a full set of tools for movement building and engagement from a brilliant radical black woman who's been doing this work for a long time. I'll leave you with this excerpt. She's speaking about the culture. The time, the energy, the money, we actually have all of that in abundance. What we lack is will. What we put our attention on grows. We have been growing otherness, borders, separateness. And in all that division, we have created layer upon layer of trauma and vengefulness, conditions for permanent war, practices that move us into a battle with the very planet we rely on for all life. The scale of division, conflict, racism, xenophobia, and hierarchical supremacy on our planet is overwhelming. Finding the places of healing and transformation, moving towards a world beyond enemies, is work that has to be done for our survival, which means transformative justice, justice that transforms the root cause of injustice, is necessary at every scale, but I am particularly focused on how it becomes the common orientation and practice of movements for social change, for peace, for liberation. I tie transformative justice into emergent strategy because it feels like a non-negotiable aspect of our future, and because the natural world has guidance for us here. Transformative justice, in the context of emergent strategy, asks us to consider how to transform toxic energy, hurt, legitimate pain, and conflict into solutions, to get under the wrong, to find a way to coexist, be energy moving towards life together. While we often put our attention on the state and demand transformative and restorative justice, it is important that individuals begin practicing in our personal, familial, and communal lives. We can reach the people we need to reach and measure our work by the way the relationships feel. It is hard work, but it is accessible to anyone, anywhere, at any scale.